Okay, we're gonna get started. Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock somewhere on the computer. So that one is a little slow. So welcome to the Senate Education Committee. And they will please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first Senate bill here is 377, and I have Senator Carson as the first speaker on it and the sponsor. Welcome.
Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Auburn, Londonderry, and Hudson, and I have for your consideration this morning Senate Bill 377 FN, which seeks to establish the Achieving a Better Life Experience, or ABLE, Savings Account Program Administration Fund. Madam Chair, this is an amendment to the existing fund that is being requested by the state treasurer and the executive director of the Governor's Commission on Disability. The purpose of this amendment is to create a non-lapsing dedicated fund to deposit a portion of the assessments or fees paid by and collected from the New Hampshire ABLE Plan participant. New Hampshire discontinued a 6-year partnership with the Ohio State Treasurer's Office and joined a new consortium of 19 states, the National ABLE Alliance, in October of 2023. As part of this agreement, New Hampshire had the option to collect a small portion of the fee charged to participants, which is $5 per year, and use it for its own purposes. Since there is no funding for this program, New Hampshire opted to receive the $5 per year from each participant. Excuse me. And the monies will be deposited into this new dedicated fund. The funds will support the administration of this program. This amendment also deletes language prohibiting the use of general funds. This is a housekeeping measure. RSA 195K:2, Roman 3 already states that administrative costs will be paid from the savings plan. Madam Chair, at this point, I will conclude my testimony. There are folks here that are involved directly with the plan that will be able to answer your questions much better than I can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time this morning.
State Treasurer Monica Metzapelli.
If it's okay,
Morning.
Madam Chair, I will.
Yes, you may
assist during this
join.
testimony. Thank
Yes,
you.
please.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mezzapelli.
And for the record, Madam Chair and members of this committee, Chuck Sayer, Executive Director, Governor's Commission on Disability. Thank you.
So first, I would like to thank Senator Carson and Senator Bradley for being the lead sponsors of this bill, and obviously all of the other legislators that are supporting this bill. This is a request from Director Sayer and myself, and we're simply asking for the establishment of a dedicated non-lapsing account. The reason for that is we're going to start receiving a portion of a fee that is being charged currently to the New Hampshire ABLE participants. This is a new arrangement. As Senator Carson mentioned in her testimony, we discontinued a partnership with the state of Ohio, the state treasurer's office, and we now have a partnership with the National ABLE Alliance. With this new partnership, we're going to be able to collect $5 per account, and we would like to use that to support the administration of this program, to support the program in general. So we need a place to deposit the money, and so this is just a, asking for a house for these funds that we're about to collect very soon. So that's what this bill, the main purpose of this bill. As I mentioned, this is a new partnership. We're not expecting a lot of money will be deposited in this fund because it's $5 per account, and so it will take some time to build some funds that will come to the state. For example, it will take about 1,000 accounts to receive $5,000. So we expect that this fund will grow over time and perhaps provide more support for the state and for this program. But right now, we just need a place to deposit these funds and credit the revenue to the state. Chuck, I don't know if you would like to add anything to
Sure.
that.
Thank you, Monica. So on behalf of this bill, the existing legislation names the state treasurer and the executive director of the Governor's Commission on Disability as the co-administrators of New Hampshire's Able Savings Program. The program has been in effect since we launched back in 2017. The enabling legislation came about in 2016. And as State Treasurer Mezzapelle has pointed out, because we are now under a new arrangement with the National Able Alliance, we do need that vehicle to collect the monies that could potentially come in. On a side note, Able Savings plans are an incredible resource for individuals with a disability. Essentially, in a very high-level discussion, individuals and their family members can now save money without jeopardizing or risking needs-based benefits similar to SSI and SSDI, so long as the expenses are unqualified disability expenses. It's a great tool. Many of our individuals in the communities and their families truly enjoy the program, and we anticipate it will grow. So as State Treasurer Mezzapelle had stated, your consideration is deeply appreciated for this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the remaining committee? Senator Prentice, do you have any questions? Any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Have a
very
nice
much.
day. Take care.
Anybody else who likes to speak to this bill? Seeing none, that closes the testimony on Senate Bill 377. And let's see. Yeah, okay. We have to wait until 9:15 for the next bill.
Not used to that. We're so used to going over.
Yeah. Okay, it's 9:15, and we'll get started with Senate Bill 379, and Senator Prentice will speak to it.
Last week I had the opportunity to speak about injury prevention, and I got a little worried about what might happen with with these chairs. So, good morning, Chair Ward, and honorable members of the Senate Education Committee. For the record, my name is Sue Prentice from West Lebanon, New Hampshire. I am the state senator for District 5, covering 15 communities, including parts of Grafton, Sullivan, and one town in Merrimack County, the lovely town of New London. Today, I have the honor of introducing Senate Bill 379, a bill that establishes requirements for the placement and maintenance of automated external defibrillators, AEDs, and requires an individual trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, to supervise school-sponsored sports activities. By way of background, many of you know I'm a paramedic. But when I was in high school and in college, I first engaged in pre-hospital medical care through my work as a student athletic trainer. So my first foray into this interest in medicine started in actually working with athletes, both preparing them, helping to prevent injuries, and responding on the field. I also have spent over 20 years training and rehearsing with teams, both in the field and in emergency departments, on how to respond as a team. I've witnessed the value of this training firsthand when managing both trauma and cardiac arrest resuscitations. Each member of the responding team knows their role, knows what life-saving objectives need to be achieved. These coordinated efforts have proven to save lives. Many of you may remember, I know on January 2nd, I think it was January 2nd, 2022, we're a football family. We were watching with the Buffalo Bills versus the Bengals when Damar Hamlin suddenly collapsed on the field. And I remember I call it my perch in the kitchen at the breakfast bar, saying, I watched him go down. I thought he's unresponsive, and he was in cardiac arrest. What we know is that team and how they prepared themselves in the NFL, but specifically that night, that particular team had prepared, had trained, had the proper equipment, could get to it quickly, knew what their roles were. And Damar Hamlin is now back on the football field. So with that in mind, and actually before that, I just want to speak to in 2021, under the leadership of Senator Gannon, and I worked with him on this bill, we passed legislation requiring that the local board of each school district or governing body of each non-public school, including grades 4 through 12, establish an emergency action plan for responding to serious and potentially life-threatening sports injuries. So we already have set the foundation for this. Senate Bill 379 builds on the planning and this planning and foundation that's been set. And it amends RSA 200-40C to include the checking and maintaining of AEDs, again, our automated external defibrillators, so we have to make sure that they are routinely in working order. Makes the AED readily accessible and well marked so that anybody can have access to it, not locked away in a school or respectfully in a school nurse's office. Requires that the AED be within 3 minutes of a patient's side. We hover around 3 minutes because we know scientifically that when a heart has stopped, and in this case is particularly, has a certain type of beat, that the way to change that and restore a normal rhythm is to get an electrical shock to them in a timely manner. Have staff members CPR trained, and require an annual rehearsal of the plan to respond to emergencies, including sudden cardiac arrest. I did want to share with everybody, I do have a letter I want to read into the record from Jim Swosey, who's EMS medical director at Cheshire Medical Center. But we did work in 2002, and I was actually working in state government. I was appointed to a commission that was established to put AEDs in all public schools. So there was some funding that came, and it was largely private funding, but this commission worked to make sure that any schools that didn't already have an AED were able to access an AED because they were funded through this project. And at a certain point, we had some funding left over, so we started working with the private schools. It's I'm not so concerned about the fact that we don't, that this is going to require some type of burden in terms of purchasing AEDs, because they are everywhere. And we made this effort to put them particularly in the schools. And I'm sure when you walk out of this room today, you'll look around, and every time you notice one of these boxes with an AED in it, you would think about this. And that is the point, that you know where it is. So I did want to share that work has been done. And I just believe we have an opportunity and a responsibility to build on the plan that already was passed in 2021 by Senator Gannon to lift this up to another level, build in the specific cardiac arrest resuscitation efforts. So I hope that you will join me in supporting Senate Bill 379. And if I may, Senator Ward, can I read Dr. Swozey's letter into the record? And I'm sure there are others that are here that are going to want to speak to this and have more expertise. So, dear Senate Education Committee members, I am writing this letter in support of Senate Bill 379. Sudden cardiac arrest takes the lives of approximately 1,000 Americans per day and is the leading cause of sudden death in exercising young athletes. Although overall survival rates for sudden cardiac arrest remain low, that's going to be less than 10% nationally, it can be effectively treated through prompt recognition, early CPR, and the use of an automated external defibrillator. Having on-site AEDs available in public locations, such as schools or athletic fields, increases survival from sudden cardiac arrest greater than 60 to 80%. In addition to having an on-site AED, implementing an emergency action plan that includes the presence of CPR-trained personnel or individuals and increases the likelihood of prompt recognition, rapid initiation of CPR, decreased time to getting that defibrillator, that AED, to a patient's side will improve the survival rates from sudden cardiac arrest. These are simple, cost-effective strategies that can prevent sudden cardiac arrest. Passage of this bill will increase the safety of our student athletes and prevent avoidable deaths during sporting events. So with that, I'll conclude my testimony. I'm happy to take any questions. And again, I believe I have some experts here with me that know even more about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have a question? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Ward. And I'll give you this letter for the record. Pete? Swozey? Wonderful.
Nancy Vaughn. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Senator Ward and Senator Gendro, and of course, Senator Prentice, sponsor of the bill. My name for the record, it's a little bit closer. My name for the record is Nancy Vaughn, Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association in New Hampshire. This is a very, it's an important issue to me personally, mainly because I have worked extensively in the area of automated external defibrillators and getting them to be more in the public. Before, it was basically hospital officials that had these big machines that could restart a heart. And then it became fire departments. I came on the scene to try to get these into the hands of every police officer vehicle that's in the state, because they are often the first on the scene. And then publicly have seen hotels have AEDs, and so it's been a pleasure not only working for the American Heart Association but particularly on this issue. I am not going to say that I am more expert than Senator Prentice on this issue. I do not teach CPR or AED use, though I have successfully gone through CPR training and AED use courses, so almost anyone can learn this. I think the important distinction for this bill, in addition to what Senator Prentice had shared, that the current emergency action plans for schools law that we are adding to is for schools who own their own AEDs at this point. And so these are individuals who would be trained in CPR, trained in AED use. There is a fiscal note attached to this bill, but I do not see this bill creating more costs for school districts. The rehearsing of action plans, whether it be for broken legs or for cardiac arrest, need to be rehearsed. So these school officials already have that, in their psyche, but it's good to put that in writing, that these are groups of individuals who come together to carry out these steps and should rehearse them throughout the year. Could be once a year, it could be multiple times a year, just to make sure that they are fluid in who is doing what, around the making sure someone calls 911, that CPR is performed immediately, and that someone is going to get that AED if it's not currently on site. And again, the 1 to 3 minutes is also in the bill, and that is scientifically shown to be the right amount of time to make sure that you're getting an AED applied to an individual. So again, obviously, the American Heart Association is in support of this bill, and the fact that it really is just adding on to a current law. In terms of the number of cardiac arrests in the country, I believe Senator Prentice did touch on that, but it's over 356,000 people will suffer out of hospital cardiac arrests. Only about 90% of those individuals will survive. 23,000 kids, it's estimated, will also experience cardiac arrest, kids under the age of 18. Most of these are happening when it's during school sports, is happening during about 40%. What I'm trying to say is about 40% of kids who are suffering cardiac arrest, it's happening to them during school sports where there are sudden movements like football and basketball. And we also do support people screening, schools screening, healthcare providers screening these young folks for any possible congenital heart defect that might be what is going to cause their cardiac arrest. What happened with the Buffalo Bills player was a kind of a rare thing, but it does happen, which is called commotio cordis, and it is when a sudden strike, a traumatic blunt force strike to over the heart, right in between heartbeats. And so but it does happen to kids, and it has happened to kids here in New Hampshire. And beyond that, there are other common congenital heart defects that affect kids. And again, many go undiagnosed. So again, having AEDs on site is really very important. But making sure that a smooth transition of care happens, and that EMS can get there as soon as they can for schools that don't have AEDs. But again, from what I understand, most schools in New Hampshire have automated external defibrillators. And just really quickly, nope, I've already said that, so I don't want to repeat what I've said, or certainly what Senator Prentice had said. I also have one of our New Hampshire board members for the American Heart Association also wrote a letter of testimony. Unfortunately, she is unable to be here today. She is Emily Knight, and she is a nurse at Wentworth Douglas Hospital, and has also spent her career in pediatric advanced cardiac life support. So she sees this happening with kids. These are the kids that will come to her in the hospital. But she did write a letter in support of this bill as well. So I will turn that in as along with my written testimony. And I think those were the points that I wanted to make. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer them today or beyond today.
Questions from the committee members? I have a question. Who is going to monitor the actual training on a regular basis by school personnel?
So current,
Senator
is that your
Prentice?
hand that I see up? Or I'll try to. Okay, yes. So currently there are individuals for emergency action plans who need to be identified as team members. So those are already identified. There's also stipulations that someone be trained in CPR. And again, as I said, if they have an AED, they have to be trained in AED use as well. Though anyone can use an AED. They are so easy to use. But there is someone who already provides oversight of emergency action teams within school districts, already in current law.
So what you're saying, there's somebody in each school that is assigned to be the emergency plan
Yes.
activator, or whatever. you
Yes,
wanna
a
call it.
team of,
A team,
of
okay.
people. And we really do recommend that it be, when it comes to the steps for cardiac arrest, that it be one person who has overall oversight of the team to make sure they're directing people to be doing CPR, call 911, getting the AED.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much, and I urge you to support Senate Bill 379. Thank you.
I'm sure we will. Scott Gross.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Scott Gross. I'm a business administrator who works for SAU 19, which is Goffstown and New Boston. I had an opportunity to review the proposed changes to this law, the legislation, and I also had an opportunity to show you that, yes, the law was enacted in our community. We do have an emergency action plan. So I think overall the intent of this bill is extremely noble, and seeing the need for AEDs and those trained is evident. But what I'm here to talk about are just some of the getting into the weeds a little bit, shall we say, where we have to comply as local school districts, with these laws. So the first thing that I wanted to mention was that, in looking at lines 18 through 30, I noticed that there are differences in some of the terminology. So for an example, on line 20, each AED shall be readily accessible. Line 21 uses the word shall not be locked. And then there's other ones where it's suggested, will. And I know that the words in law, they mean something when you say shall or will. And there are some, nuances there. One of the concerns that with the specificity in this bill is that it does create, in my opinion, an increased legal burden that we have to deal with as a school district. Obviously, we deal with civil litigation and issues all the time, and this is yet another one of these things. If we did not comply with the shalls, it's a higher legal standard, for us if there were to be any type of action against a local school district or individual. So I wanted to state that. On line number 29, where it says require that an individual trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation supervise organized school-sponsored activities. This is the one that I think is kind of most important, to me when I read it. What is a school-sponsored sports activity? Because the ones that are obvious are like a varsity, JV, a freshman team, even a middle school type team. But what about a men's basketball league where the school either rents or allows an event to happen, or we often have a basketball tournament for in our community for a fundraiser. Because we waive a fee, are we sponsoring that in a way? Because you could say that we are. If we have $1,000 fee and we waive it, are we sponsoring it? And then is there a requirement to have a supervisor, somebody who's supervised in in resuscitation? So that we want to comply. And I think that's the most important thing that I want to convey to you as senators, is that all of the folks who work in schools want to comply with the laws. We just want the law to be clear and unambiguous in terms of how to execute it. And then lastly, the funding for the devices. So we have been fortunate. I can speak only for my school districts. We have been able to get donations of AEDs. However, recently we've had to replace AEDs, and they cost, I believe, it was $1,000 to $1,500 to replace an AED. And then the burden of, when you say that you're going to rehearse it, there is a cost. And yes, it is nominal. But as you know, as senators, each and everything that is placed upon any entity, whether that be a school district, a municipality, in isolation, it might not be, let's say it's an hour, but when you add all of the other things that school districts have to do, whether that be suicide training, bullying prevention, it's yet another task that has to be done. So I just want you to be, aware of that. But, certainly I want to end on this. School safety and the safety of our student athletes in our community is of paramount importance, and we want to do that. We want AEDs available. We want as many people trained as possible. But with that comes some, it's not overburdening, but there are some costs, to that we have to recognize. And I wish that there would be funding for these devices. I wish there would be funding for some of this training, because again, when you add all those requirements and mandates that we have to comply with, there is a cost overall. That's all I have, unless there are any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? No.
All right, thank you.
very
Have a good
much.
day.
Is there anybody else who likes to speak to Senate Bill 379? Will you come up and state your name?
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Stearns. I'm representing the Corey Stringer Institute from the University of Connecticut. So, honorable members of the committee, I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Corey Stringer Institute, and I'm here today representing the Institute's full support for SB 379 Emergency Action Plans for Sport-Related Injuries. The mission of the Corey Stringer Institute is to provide research, education, advocacy, and consultation to maximize performance, optimize safety, and prevent sudden death for the athlete, warfighter, and the laborer. Specific to sports, one of our primary goals is to reduce catastrophic injuries related to the top causes of sudden death. Sudden cardiac arrest accounts for the greatest number of athlete deaths each year, consisting of about 60% of all athlete deaths annually. So sudden cardiac arrest, as you've already heard today, the survival is time sensitive, and it has about a 10% decrease in odds of survival for every minute that the application of an AED is delayed. So after about 5 minutes, the chance of survival is about 50%, highlighting the importance of immediate access to AEDs and the inability to rely solely on EMS response. Given that sudden cardiac arrest can occur with or without previous risk factors, athletes do remain susceptible. Alarmingly, again, as you've already heard today, every 3 days, an athlete will experience a sudden cardiac arrest. Encouragingly, we also know that reported survival rates can reach as high as 89% when an AED is applied promptly. So the proposed language provides crucial measures to ensure that the factors most responsible for sudden cardiac arrest are provided to our youth. And this includes CPR and AED training, along with ensuring the accessibility of functional AEDs during athletic events. This is, however, only if an AED is already purchased by the school. The bill does stop short of requiring an AED within 1 to 3 minutes of every athletic activity. So one point of consideration I'd like to provide is strengthening the language regarding AED access during athletic activities. There exists a disparity in requirements for AED access when compared to other safety equipment requirements for less frequent school threats, such as fires and fire extinguishers. An AED is a basic health and safety protection that all athletes deserve access to, similar to equipment for other health and safety provisions. It's important to realize that schools must fund various aspects of sports programs. It's an inherent cost of holding sports programs. This includes equipment, field maintenance, transportation, officiating costs, as well as others. The minimal expense of procuring and maintaining AEDs is dwarfed by the overall school athletics budgets for most schools. And in the case of financial constraints for smaller schools, these can be addressed through grant programs and external support. AEDs are integral to student safety and are currently mandated within schools in 20 other states, and 16 of these require them specifically for sporting events as well. The passage of SB 148 in 2022 which required emergency action plans, positioned New Hampshire among the top 5 states prioritizing high school sports for athletes' safety. The proposed amendments to that law through SB 379 furthers this trajectory and establishes New Hampshire as a model for other states to emulate. By passing this legislation, we can significantly increase the chances of athletes returning home safely. This legislation represents a crucial step in preventing the needless loss of young athletes' lives and provides essential policies for safeguarding their well-being. So thank you for your time today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have Theodore. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Ward. Committee, my name is Theodore Smith. I'm from Sunapee, New Hampshire. I am employed by Colby Sora College in New London, New Hampshire. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself as well as the New Hampshire Athletic Trainers Association, not on behalf of Colby Sora, but I do not see where they would have any issues with my position of supporting SB 379. I'm an athletic trainer and I'm also an educator at Colby Sora, and I also serve as an instructor for the American Red Cross. As an instructor for the American Red Cross, I work with certifying and recertifying our student athletes who have to do internships, our coaches, our nursing students, our athletic training students that we used to have, as well as exercise science students, sports management students, all before they go off to internships, so they are prepared in the event that they experience a emergency. They are prepared to act. And so, recognizing the training that I've been doing for over 20 years with students, I can see the impact it has of a prepared individual. So as we wind up looking at SB 379 and how it winds up looking to enhance RSA 240 SC, it helps to be able to create that clarity that is necessary for administrators to recognize how to best support their athletes that are engaging in what is a risky activity. We hope that it is low risk for individuals. Screening and everything else is done around that. But the biggest aspect we look for is this bill looks to be able to create clarity for administrators that are trying to work to be able to, one, comply with the laws, but two, also to be able to create as safe an environment as possible. There have been discussions here in regards to the cost associated with, and we have to recognize that when we elect to sponsor these particular activities, there's inherent cost associated with. We have the cost of officials. We have the cost for coaches and other components. Being able to have a device which is so impactful for individuals that are, if they are going to have a cardiac event, it most likely is going to be fibrillation. It's going to be ventricular fibrillation that they're going to be experiencing, and that's what AEDs are designed to be able to assist with. So when we look at the outcomes of an individual who winds up having one of these conditions, they are greatly enhanced when the AED is available and is implemented by individuals that are trained to do so, so they will not delay and be able to apply as soon as possible. So just to kind of close summarize, I encourage you to support SB 379 to be able to enhance the clarity associated with RSA 240C so that we can wind up helping our athletes in the state of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, anybody else who likes to speak on 379? If not, this closes the hearing on 379. We'll go right into our next bill, which is Senate Bill 44. And the prime sponsor is Senator Prentice.
Again, my favorite chair. Excuse me. Good morning again, Chair Ward and members of the Senate Education Committee. For the record, my name is Sue Prentice West Lebanon, New Hampshire. I'm the state senator for District 5, representing 15 communities in large parts of Grafton, Sullivan counties, and one town in Merrimack, the wonderful town of New London. Today, I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 444, requiring the Board of Education to post agenda items and meeting materials on its website at least 48 hours before each noticed meeting. One important test of transparency in government, in my opinion, is the timely sharing of documents with proposed policies, actions, and rules to be considered by appointed and elected officials. When not shared ahead of a meeting, how can the public know what's happening, what's to be considered at that meeting or meetings to come? 91A does not address the timing of, or does not it addresses the timing of a meeting agenda and posting a meeting, but not specifically the materials that go with that agenda. And what I've come to learn it's come to my attention, and with some frustration from members of the public in my district, that meeting materials for both October 2023 and December 2023 were not available until the day of or during a meeting. And I understand that, although I don't have the specific months, that this took place in 2022 as well. I'm sure, considering how we practice as a Senate, that we would want practices to be consistent across all bodies that are doing the business of the public. Some of what I've come to learn in terms of concerns that were brought forward and why items were not posted, I mean, it largely makes sense, but I think we have to take this into consideration because I've had to tackle some of these challenges both in the public and the private sector. That the materials and agendas were late because an assistant or somebody was on vacation. The packet was maybe too big to actually be uploaded and posted on a website. Technical issues prevented materials from being posted. Had to work with some outside company who had not yet been responsive in getting the materials to the Board of Education for posting. Some materials were not included in the packet, only provided at the meeting because changes were still being made. So the challenge with these practices are often that with rules, and again, or any kind of policies that are being considered that impact the public for approval by the State Board of Education, is that those that may want to, members of the public, associations, administrators, educational groups, or, if you're thinking about any public body, they want to have the time to actually review the materials and be able to come in and participate in the process of governing and democracy, which is provide public comment. So while not every item on the agenda has a hearing, there is an opportunity for the public local school board members or associations or individuals to make public comment. And so without those materials ahead of time, how do you adequately work to prepare as a member of the public or any group that has an interest to come in and do this work? So I'm simply asking for transparency to be implemented here, asking for within 48 hours of a meeting that these materials are posted so that anyone could have access to them. It's what we do here. It's what we did when I was on a city council. And I understand some of the challenges that groups might face, but if this is a recurring problem, and again, I only have 2 specific examples, and I've heard but don't have the exact months, that this is not the first time that this has happened. So I think we can all cooperatively work to make this happen and to give the public what they need, access to meeting materials ahead of time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and if I can't, I'll always get back to you. Thank you.
Questions? Senator Lang.
Thank you for taking my question. So my question is, why not everybody?
What do you
Right,
mean, why
so-
not everybody?
So 91A exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And why is this not put under 91A to affect every state board, every town, every school board to make sure that public has access? Why are we targeting? We have a section that deals with that 91A. Why couldn't we put this provision under there and have it apply to everybody?
Senator Lang, thank you for the question. I'd be happy to attempt to amend 91A. I thought it might, that might be a larger challenge, and that we could, if this is the only board that I'm hearing has issues, then move in that direction. But if that's the preferred method, then I will work to amend 91A. Sure. Good question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Megan Tuttle.
Okay, you're making me nervous to sit down now. Good morning. Thank you, Senate Education Committee. For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle, president of NEA New Hampshire, representing about 17,000 educators across the state. Today, I'm here in support of Senate Bill 444, excuse me. State Board of Education makes tremendous amount of consequential decisions that affect my members as a whole and public education, perhaps now more than ever. It's been frustrating the last few years where agendas and supporting materials have either been posted very inconsistent timeframes, sometimes not until the day before, the day of, or sometimes even after the meeting has concluded. And as Senator Prentice mentioned, this did happen in October and December of 2023. Just to give you a flavor of a typical agenda, it might include different items such as initial or final rules proposals on major issues, educator license requirements, code of conduct discipline, curriculum standards, minimum standards for public school approval, approval of Learn Everywhere programs, approval of withdrawal of applications for from cooperative school districts, approval on chartered school districts, and those are just to name a few. 2 years ago, this legislature placed requirements on the State Board of Education to hold public comment period at each meeting, and that's on every agenda now. However, it's difficult for the public to speak on anything if they don't know what they're speaking to. There are some significant issues that are brought before the State Board of Education that do affect my members, and we cannot follow along with the discussion without the meeting materials. It makes it very hard to know what they're actually talking about. It would almost be like coming to a hearing, listening to the discussion, but not having the bill in front of you to know actually what's going on. The State Board could be adopting a rule having major implications for my members, but if it's not published until the night before or after the meeting, how can we compare any changes made to the initial proposal? Update the thousands of educators we have a duty to inform in a timely manner. The next step is that those proposals would be sent to GELCAR, where any commentary on policy changes has already passed. Other major state bodies like the New Hampshire Executive Council have their massive agendas and supporting materials published online the Friday before their usual Wednesday meeting. The Fiscal Committee of the General Court has their agenda and materials out a week in advance. 48 hours should just be the bare minimum of time to expect the public to have access to these materials at the regular monthly meetings. And I think this would provide some consistency for the public to expect when agendas and materials would be available, just as some of the other bodies do that I mentioned above. Thank you. If you'd please find Senate Bill 444 ought to pass, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Senator Lanang.
So again, the same question, right? Again, school boards have a lot closer and a lot more impact to your teachers. Why does this not apply to school boards? Local school boards.
I can't answer that. I'm not sure I would agree with what Senator Prentice said. I think, if that's the direction people want to go, then we should definitely look at that. This bill just focused on the State Board of Education, so that's what I'm just replying to for today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Drew Klein.
Good morning, Senators, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Drew Klein. I'm Chairman of the State Board of Education. And I want to start off by pointing out that we're talking about transparency here. The State Board of Education is not required by 91A to post our meeting agendas or our materials online. We're not required to release those ahead of time, and that has been our practice to do so. As long as I've been chairman, we go out of our way to be transparent. Our practice at the State Board of Education is to post online our agenda and all the meeting materials that we're legally allowed to post immediately once they are in the hands of board members. That is our practice and has been our practice since I've been chairman of the board. The agenda goes online pretty quickly. We typically get our agenda and our meeting materials as board members pretty late compared to, I think, a lot of other boards and committees in New Hampshire. That is partly because of the process. It's partly because of staffing issues. We don't have our own staff at the State Board of Education. We rely on administrative staff from the Department of Ed. So the board meetings operate kind of on a conveyor belt. I don't get to just pick and choose what goes on. We have state laws that require us to review rules every 10 years. So we have rules that keep coming up for review. Those go through the staff. The staff tries to keep track of that. We get hearings. Sometimes those get put on the agenda late. So we strive to make sure the meetings are timely, that they're all aligned. We have rules and laws that we have to follow in terms of when a public hearing is held. So the agenda can sometimes change late depending on what staff is prepared to be present at a meeting, what they get prepared for rulemaking. If we have a charter school application, for example, that is coming in and maybe there's last minute questions, sometimes things get taken off the agenda because I'll have questions or a staff will have questions about things that we think is going to be on the agenda, but then it gets changed. So it is not the case that we just have an agenda written a couple weeks in advance and we know about it and we're just holding it. We make every effort to get that posted online as soon as it's in the hands of me and the other board members. We did have a problem last month in December with getting materials posted late online. And I think it was October when we had another one. Those are pretty rare. And typically they involve extremely large packets. So we often have hearing between a school district and a family or a parent. Those materials can be over 1,000 pages. Sometimes we have late breaking materials, and sometimes we have staff issues where staff absences, vacations, and things don't get posted as per our practice. So that would be the rare instance when we don't get something posted more than 48 hours. My interest in transparency, I think, is an example based on practice, what we've been doing. But I would question this particular bill in a couple of reasons. One is Senator Lang brought up, this really belongs in the right to know law. If you want to put it in the right to know law for all boards, I think that's the right place for this to go. I don't see why the State Board of Education would be singled out for this as opposed to having all school boards have to comply with this. But the way this is written, when it refers to all meeting materials consistent with the right to know law, that raises questions for me because, again, we have hearings where we're settling a dispute between a family and a school district. Those often go into the hundreds of pages. Occasionally they can go over 1,000 pages of emails and back and forth and letters and months worth of hearing materials. To post those online, which we don't do, the parents almost always request a non-public hearing for those. Would require hiring another staff person for the department solely to do redactions. That's what this bill would require, I think, because we would have to redact massive volumes of documents every couple of months. It is an incredibly arduous process. So I think just taking a look at what you're actually trying to require here, if you want notice of the agenda, that's one thing. To require all materials to be posted online, I think would create a staffing issue for us and potentially some right to know issues. So happy to take any other questions, but I'm all in favor of getting information out there to the public and ahead of time, which is what we've striven to do for my entire tenure.
Questions? Sure. Senator Brunson. Thank you, Chair Ward. Thank you, Chair Klein, for joining us today. So I hear what you're saying about 91A and consistent with 91A when it has to do with materials. I might question supporting materials. I don't know if it's a question of a clarification. So if there are documents, the way 91A is written, if there are exceptions, say, to holding meetings or providing documentation, if it has to do with, say, a personnel matter or something that is sensitive that could affect somebody's reputation, I think is maybe the word that gets used. So I think some of, you talked about those thousands of pages of redacting. It seems to me that those may already be exempt.
Well, you would
So
be
it's a little bit of a
requiring them.
clarification, a little bit of a
Yeah,
question.
so-
If it's consistent with 91A,
Right.
that shouldn't.
Well, that's where I'm not an attorney.
Me neither.
But so I think we have an attorney here who can answer that question better than I can. And as I read it, I think it potentially puts us in danger of having to have someone on staff. If you're requiring all materials consistent with 91A, there's a question of whether we can't post those materials and we just take them off, and what constitutes what we don't post and what we do post, versus do we have to post it but redact? So I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's potentially problematic the way the bill's worded.
Okay. And can I ask one more question?
Follow up?
Oh, sorry, follow up. Did you say at the beginning of, so thank you for taking my
Yeah,
question.
sure.
The beginning of your testimony that the Board of Education's meeting materials are exempt from, or just,
No.
when you open,
Yeah,
made
so
reference to that
under
you
the-
don't have to comply with 91A?
No, 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 no.
did I
You
miss
totally
that?
misunderstood. Yeah, we have to comply with 91A. Let me be very clear. Under 91A, we're not required to post our agenda and meeting materials ahead of the meeting. 91A does not do that. It doesn't require any board to do that.
I know.
We have to, that's what I'm saying. So we comply with the law, but we go beyond the law by making a practice of posting these things before every meeting. We do that despite not being required to, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Thank you. 'Cause I
Sure.
went to exemptions.
Yeah,
immediately.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
Senator Fenton.
Thank you for taking my question. Oh, thank you for taking my question. And you
Yeah.
might have just answered it. So what is the current practice now? I want to
Yeah,
find out if
sure.
you're having a meeting
Yep.
and what's on the agenda.
Yep. So the current practice is, again, we have one administrator at the department who handles our agenda and meeting materials. She also handles the commissioner's agenda and all his schedule and all that stuff. She's overworked. If the legislature wanted to give the Board of Education its own staff, I think that would be great, but we don't have that right now. So the practice is, once we get the agenda and the meeting materials all together, they go out to the board members, and immediately once it is hit send and we have it, and we do it on Canvas now, immediately the next step is to send them to the public information officer to be posted online. So as soon as we get them, the next step is to make them available online, and that's our current practice. So in the example of December, I don't know exactly what happened there, but there was a disconnect between when we got them and they went on, and that was an error that should not have happened. So we normally, in our practice, make sure that they're up as soon as we get them. So, but often we will, I don't say often, sometimes we will have a packet involving a dispute between a school board and a parent, or a school district and a parent, where the materials are so large, or we'll have, I'm not 100% sure this has happened with charter schools, but sometimes the charter school application packets get bigger than they're supposed to be because they have all these attachments and meeting materials. And the PIO cannot post them. The department has to reach out to the tech support, to IT, to have those posted. So that has been flagged to me as something that's happened in the past, is causing a delay with posting the whole packet of materials. Is sometimes they're so large that it takes IT to post them, and we can't do it at the department level. So there's a delay there.
Just a quick follow-up.
Follow-up.
Thank you for answering that.
Sure.
Just a quick follow-up. So you're saying you're posting them as soon as you're getting them. So
Well, that is the procedure that we put in place. So that's how it's supposed to happen. Yeah.
So let's say you're getting them the day of. You're posting them the day of the agenda items.
Of
Day
what?
of the meeting.
No, we
It's
shouldn't.
always far in advance.
Not far. Typically, the board gets the agenda and media materials, and this is typically, not every single month. We strive to get them by the Friday before our Thursday meetings. So that is when we strive to. Sometimes, like this month, we don't get them until Monday before the Thursday meeting because of just delays in getting the packet together and stuff like that. So, but typically they're to us by the Monday of the meeting week. Yeah. Sure.
Senator Lang.
Would you agree it'd be bad public policy to create a carve out for 91A that's only unique to one board as compared to all persons subject to 91A?
100%.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any more? Anybody else who would like to speak to Senate Bill? Attorney Fenton.
Good morning.
For the record, my name is Diana Fenton. I'm an attorney with the Department of Education. As this committee is well aware, the department is here only to provide technical assistance. What struck the department are really two things, kind of the placement of this bill, that it should be applicable to all agencies and should be amending the Right to Know Law, 91A. Also, as a practical matter, this bill does not have a fiscal note attached to it, and the requirements contained within this to redact the meeting materials would require additional staff. The department does not have the bandwidth to take this on currently, so we would need additional assistance and resources for that purpose if this were to pass this committee. The department complies with Right to Know. We respond timely to Right to Know, but it does require to go through the materials, make those appropriate redactions, and supply those. And so currently, as written, this bill would need a fiscal note for the impact it would have on the department. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Chair Ward, and thank you for taking my question, Attorney Fenton. And I originally had directed this towards Chair Klein, but he said he wasn't a lawyer. You are, so
Oh,
I'm going
boy.
to ask you.
Yeah.
But I think that, so there is a discussion about volumes of documents that could potentially need to be redacted, and it strikes me that those, as I heard from him briefly, and hopefully I didn't misunderstand this, are cases or situations that are sensitive in nature and most likely would not, 91A would protect them from public disclosure.
I think in large part, you're correct. 91A would protect them from public disclosure, but that doesn't mean that someone at the department doesn't have to take the time to go through them. So you still have to go through the documents. You still have to read them, and I think that there is conflicting practices, if you will, as to whether you say this is a blanket protection, and and I'm just going to use this as an example. This whole document is protected. We don't have to turn it over, or do we have to go through it and redact the pieces that would fall within that privacy right? So when I was at the Attorney General's office in the Criminal Bureau, we would often just say, this whole case file, because it's still pending litigation, this does not get turned over. This entire case file is exempt, right? But at the Department of Education, the practice has been, we go through the documents and we redact what would make it personal. And so I think that's the difference to it. So again, it just doesn't alleviate the staff time of having to go through the process.
Follow up, Senator Ward.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Attorney Fenton.
Sure.
So what happens now? I mean, if again, there is material that's going to come before the board that is sensitive in nature and would be protected and be in a, not saying non-public, there's already going to be a determination on that, and somebody's already going to have read through that packet, correct?
That is my understanding. There is an attorney on staff who does work with the board, yes.
Okay, so this works, so the vetting of this material,
Reading
and I don't want to
through
get
it
into
for
the weeds of
purposes
like who's redacting and who's not, but these materials aren't just like received and then put on the table. They're reviewed to see if they fit in that particular place so they're protected from public disclosure. Okay.
Sure, but determining that something needs to be heard in a non-public session is different than reading through a document and redacting it. Having done this countless times, it does take a significant amount of time and thought. The way that I personally approach it is that anything that we release from a state agency, I just assume, even if you made the request for Right to Know, I assume it's going to be put on a park bench somewhere and available for everyone. So I think very carefully about what we are releasing as a state agency and try to make sure that people's privacy is protected. And that goes into the level of detail of making sure that someone who emails the department from a Hotmail account, I just showed my age there, or a Gmail account or something much more modern, is redacted, right? We have to look at the email addresses on each email we get, and I assure you we get a number of emails every day, to make sure that it's a work account versus a personal account. And I know that the commissioner recently had documents released inadvertently that had personal information on it. And those have real implications. And so looking at a file and saying this needs to be heard in non-public is a far cry from going through the pages and pages of documents and redacting them and making sure, because it's not just a one-off. We go through it, we redact, and then we look at it again to make sure those redactions are appropriate. And I'm not here to speak for everyone's practice, but I can tell you as a state employee of 17 years or so that has done this time and time again, this bill as written would have a significant fiscal impact on the department. If it were to move forward, we would ask for a fiscal note.
Alma? Yep. Thank you, Attorney Fenton. Just more of a statement than a question. And so I did work in state government, and I worked at an agency where I received complaints. They were, complaints about patient care, and were largely protected. And I had to do both the viewing of those and the redacting of them. And we also had multiple boards that we supported, and that was part of our job. That's what we did. We didn't need extra help. We had to adjust our schedules to get it done. So there's kind of sort of an intersection there. I know how tough it can be to be a state employee and not have enough help. So my intention is not to make it harder, but to strive for transparency. And my experience has been that, that we just did the work. So I hear what you're saying, but I just wanted to share that. That's all.
And I appreciate that, and I respect your work as a state employee, and I know we've always had that in common. And this is one of those tasks in terms of transparency that you're right. We take it on, we assimilate it, and we do it. But given the volume of material that the state board sees, this jumped out at the department as a concern. And as you know, this committee has always been very receptive of my presence and saying, we have identified this issue, and I appreciate your willingness to hear us. And I thank you for your questions and your state service.
Senator Lang.
So again, I'm just going to kind of summarize all of that and make sure I
Thank
understood
you.
it, right? So the first part is you agree it's in the wrong part of law. It should be a 91A and broadly approached to all boards and all things and not specifically targeted to the school board? You think
Well,
91A would be a more appropriate place for this?
Not a school board, but the state board. This
State
bill
board.
targets
Yep,
the
yep,
state
sorry.
board. I think anytime you have a carve out that addresses or identifies one board in particular, it should and would cause concern.
And then my follow-up, and then the second concern is the fiscal note that again, as we heard from Chairman Klein, that they had over 1,000-page report they couldn't even upload, that it would require somebody to look through all 1,000 pages to make sure what is, what would potentially would be non-public and not subject to 91A and what is subject to 91A. And it would require that because we're saying everything must be posted, someone have to go through 1,000 pages or whatever the number is for that case and make that same determination you made in criminal trials, which is this a discoverable item or non-discoverable item? What goes to the, right? And that's why the fiscal note's problematic.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
lack
the
of.
exact analysis. I might push back on your language a little bit. I think to summarize it succinctly, this would have a fiscal impact on the department. We would ask that if this bill were to move forward, it would need a fiscal note.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this committee's time.
Do we have anybody else in the audience who likes to speak to this bill? Anybody? If not, this closes the hearing on the Senate Bill 444. So the next bill is Senate Bill 528. Okay, thank you. And I was going to say, I didn't think that was Senator Gray. Senator Gray. You may go ahead.
Okay, my name is James Gray. I'm a senator for District 6, which starts up in Alton and Gimleton, goes down Route 11 to Rochester. This bill here, relative to the trustees of the university system, we made a change about Granite State College and how the student trustees were apportioned. And because of that change, Granite State is no longer in the rotation. So a change needed to happen. Last summer, there was an email exchange between me and some of the people involved. And what you see in the bill is the result of that email exchange. Subsequent to that, there was a vote by the Board of Trustees of how they would like to see it done, which is not what you see in front of you. But I can tell you that there is one Senate representative to the trustees, namely me, that voted against that new one. Certainly, I think that as we look at the university system and the community college system, which is happening right now in a separate committee, that there may be significant changes made to the system overall. I believe that having all of the university and college presidents on the board and having a vote and having 2 student trustees on the board and have the vote is more than adequate to make sure that we get what we need. Adding that third one, which is what the proposal you'll get later from one of the others that are testifying. So I support what you see in front of you in the bill. I believe that that is sufficient. And certainly as we move forward, you do need to keep in mind, or at least I would like you to keep in mind, that the university system in New Hampshire, when you look at the number of students that are there, both undergrad and grad level, far exceeds the number of students that are in either Keene or Plymouth. So, certainly a system that has UNH having a trustee every year, and then the other 2 colleges having alternate years, keeping that number to 2 is more of what I had envisioned when the email exchange was done that drafted the language for this bill. And I think that adding that third one, although certainly is well supported by the student trustees and the university presidents, I'm questioned that it serves the university in the long run. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Lang.
First off, thank you. This says, Madam Chair, my daughter served on the Board of Trustees as a student voting member, so back a few years ago. So I'm familiar with the process. So, but all you're doing in this bill is you're taking out Granite State College from the rotation.
Yep.
And you're making 2 voting members out of the 3 members on the board, but all 3 members get to participate in the discussion, so their viewpoints can be heard, but ultimately only 2 get to vote on that policy.
Right now, the policy is that there are 2 voting members. That policy would be continued, but Granite State would be taken out of the rotation.
Thank you.
So, I have a question.
Yes,
Maybe
ma'am.
I just don't understand it. It says 3 members. Are you changing it? Are you putting it in amendment? Are you deleting, changing 3 to 2 members?
No, right now, what's envisioned, you will have pretty much, as Senator Lang said, each one of those, university system will have a person, Keene will have a person, and Plymouth will have a person, but only 2 of those people will be voting members. The other 1 will be a non-voting member.
Okay, so there'll still be 3 members, 3 students.
As it
Only
is
2
right
voting
now,
members.
you have those 3 plus the Granite State appointee, and only 2 of those 4 are voting.
Okay,
And there'll be people up to testify after me, supporting the vote from the trustees, so,
okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
thank you.
Jed Pimentel from USNH.
Thank you very much, Chair Ward. For the record, my name is Chad Pimentel. I'm the General Counsel of the University System of New Hampshire, and I also serve as the Secretary to its Board of Trustees, which is how I find myself before you today. I have written testimony that I'll have available for you afterwards, but I find that a lot of it is repetitive of what Senator Gray just said, so I'll try to skip to the points. First of which is thank you for taking this up. The sort of reason the genesis of all this is what Senator Gray said, which is previously there were 2 student trustees, each of whom voted and rotated among what in statute right now are 4 institutions: UNH, Keene, Plymouth, Granite State. Granite State no longer exists as a separate entity, and so we have a real just compliance issue with how we comply with the law as written. And that was what started the conversation, is we want to comply precisely with the law, and we were challenged to do that because identifying a Granite State student is increasingly problematic now that it's part of UNH. So that's what started all of this. This bill addresses that main problem and will help us come into compliance, which is why we appreciate it. As Senator Gray noted, the board's been talking about this, believe it or not, for about a year now. We saw the train coming down the tracks at us in terms of compliance, and there was a lot of discussion around how best to restructure now that there are only 3 component institutions rather than 4. And a lot of conversation was had. It wasn't until this past October, actually after the filing deadline for bills for this session, that our board finally landed on its preferred solution of, okay, now that there are only 3 institutions, what makes the most sense is add a 3rd trustee and have them all be voting. The rationale we heard is we wanted to treat all the institutions equally. Another was the student trustee terms are for 1 year. And so it's possible that you could be the trustee, the non-voting trustee for the year and just never get to vote, never have an opportunity to serve as a voting trustee because you'd rotate out, you'd graduate, or you wouldn't have that chance. And just a general belief that when there were 4 institutions, perhaps 4 voting student trustees was too many, but that 3 was manageable, and that the student viewpoint was appreciated by the board. As Senator Gray notes, nearly everything our board does is unanimous or close to it. This was 19-7, but by which our lights is pretty controversial. But it was a clear majority of the board who supported the 3 voting student option rather than 3 student trustees, one of whom does not vote. So if I were to summarize it, this bill solves a problem, and we're appreciative that it solves that problem. Our board suggests a slightly different solution to the problem, but other than that, we appreciate the committee taking this up, and we appreciate Senator Gray for having filed the bill. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? We don't have any questions?
Thank you. Appreciate
You
it.
did a good job. Are those to be distributed?
Yes, I'll pass it here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No.
Anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to Senate Bill 528? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 528. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I would.
Okay, please.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to vote.
You state your name and.
My name
where
is
you're from.
Jamie Burnett.
Okay,
I am a trustee, but I'm not here speaking for the trustees. I'm just speaking for myself. I supported the resolution that the board supported, and the majority of the board supported, to add a 3rd student trustee to certainly eliminate the Granite State position for trustees, but to make the 3rd trustee a voting member. I think there were a number of reasons for this. One is that student trustees, unlike other trustees, get to serve 1 year on the board. It's because they're students. They have to rotate in and they have to rotate out. And by the way, Senator Lang, I've been on the board now 6.5 years. And my first meeting, I met your daughter when she was a student trustee. She was a terrific trustee from Plymouth State University, and she was a voting member. And I will tell you, in the 6.5 years that I've been on the board, and I'm vice chair of the board as well, the students and the caliber of students that we have serving on the board are phenomenal. They are contributors. They are prepared. They are well studied and well read on all the issues, and many of the issues that we deal with are sophisticated in nature, and they are big contributors to the board. They have particularly been good contributors since the pandemic, and in looking at issues that some of us just don't have a perspective of because we're too far removed as students, or maybe we don't yet have children in college, but issues on mental health, for instance, and that maybe we weren't appreciative of. They have done sophisticated, significant presentations for the board, but because they serve 1 year on the board and then they rotate out, by adding a third member, which is the right thing to do, so each of the campuses are equally represented, but having one of them not be a voting member, that one student that's not a voting member will never get to vote. Now, I think that, you know, the way the board, the way I approach it, speaking for me, approach it with the student trustees, is that we want them to be prepared. The student trustees, we want them to contribute. But I think if they don't have a vote in the board, it's this perverse disincentive as to, well, are you like, are you really equal here in your participation? Do you need to be prepared? I think it's important for them to be able to have that say. We don't treat any other trustee, and they come from a variety of different vehicles. I'm a gubernatorial appointed trustee. We have 7 trustees that are elected from their alumni associations, 4 from UNH, 1 from Plymouth, Keene, prior Granite State, so 6 now. That serve 4-year terms. We have statutory trustees, Department of Education Commissioner, Agriculture, the presidents of the campuses themselves, and then we also have legislative trustees that are appointed based on the partisan leadership that exists at the time for that 2-year cycle. Every single one of them gets a vote, without question. It doesn't make sense to me to add a third student trustee and not give them a vote. And I think that's why I supported that position on the board when it came to the board. It was not something that was done in haste. It was something that was actually discussed and debated for a full year on the board throughout 4 different meetings in the governance committee and then at the full board level. And it was supported by a majority of the board, and we hope that you might consider that. The students are quality and they're caliber, and I think we want to maintain that. And I think those are the students who we want to get. And I think by making them full voting members, this third one is a full voting member, giving them equal representation across the board for all the campuses helps to ensure that. And I would tell you that almost every vote is usually a unanimous vote. The board works tirelessly at reaching consensus. There really, in my 6.5 years, have not been any votes that have been divisive. And the students are thoughtful, and I think that they deserve that opportunity. I'm willing to answer any questions that you have, and I really appreciate providing me time, Madam Chair.
Did we get your name?
Jamie Burnett, Burnett. I'm from Concord. So,
Questions from the?
yes, Senator Lane, please.
While we're opening up this chapter, should we repeal section 7, which is the appointee from the Granite State College?
Should we?
Yeah.
Because Granite State College has now been folded into the University of New Hampshire, yes, that would make sense. I do support that. I think that that's a smart thing, and I think Senator Gray has spent a lot of time in this bill. He's a great contributing member to the board as a trustee and as a legislator, and I support that provision. I think the board does as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lane.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good luck. Appreciate it.
Anybody else on Senate Bill 528? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 528. Now, let's see, what do I have here? Okay, you can have this. Senate Bill 529, and I see Senator Chandler.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Shannon Chandler, and I serve the people of Senate District 11, including Merrimack, Milford, Wilton, and Amherst. I'm here today to introduce Senate Bill 529. I am going to ask that you'll forgive me if I dart out immediately after introducing it, but my Commerce Committee is meeting and I think waiting. So this bill expands the definition of teacher. And while that might sound a little bit concerning, it is not, I assure you. It's a very, very simple bill that one of the SAUs in my district had asked me to bring forward. It does not change 189:14 in any way except to expand the language so that teacher, all the definitions prior to this paragraph stay in place, but it includes the language that's there says principals, assistant principals, librarians, and guidance counselors. But we know that a number of schools now use other terms such as dean of students, dean of faculty. These folks have the same credentials that and the same requirements that some of the people who are named. The language that I am proposing would say the term teacher shall also include, but not be limited to, principals, assistant principals, deans, librarians, guidance counselors, department directors, instructional coaches, and other similar professional positions. I think that is flexible enough to accommodate any changes. Maybe a school uses the term head of school instead of principal. Just depending on what the school terms the school use, that it would be included in this definition. There are folks here who can speak to this in terms of how it affects their lives and the conducting of business in the school system. So I appreciate you hearing from me, and I will be around, if not today, but certainly any day, to answer further questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Senator Chandler before she takes off? Seeing none, thank you very much. Merit Christina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Barrett Christina from the School Boards Association. We are opposed to Senate Bill 529 for a handful of reasons. I'll walk through them. Primarily, we're throwing in terms and positions that don't have definitions anywhere else in the law. If we look at the current law where it talks about principals, assistant principals, teachers, guidance counselors, each of those positions has a corresponding certification at the Department of Education under the Department of Education certification rules in the 500 series. So there's a correlation between the statute, which is giving non-renewal rights to these employees, and the certified position at the Department of Education. While some of these terms are used interchangeably between a dean and a principal, you know, if the term is intended to expand non-renewal rights, then it probably should be in a principal or an assistant principal. The second reason is that NHSBA is opposed to the bill is that we are concerned that this may cause confusion to current collective bargaining agreements across the state. Most school districts, their teachers have unions. There are some that are small enough they don't have a particular bargaining unit. But those collective bargaining agreements tend to include the certain positions that are within that district. The terms and phrases dean or assistant dean or whatnot are actually, the deans would not be part of the collective bargaining agreement, but other positions that are within the district are usually included within the collective bargaining agreement. So we're worried that changing the statute and adding these instructional coaches or department directors would cause confusion within local collective bargaining agreements. The other concern NHSBA has, I'm on line 3 where it says including but not limited to. Who's going to determine what the limiting factor is and what the limiting factor is not? We think that's a little bit vague and a little bit broad. That would open the door for anybody to come in and claim that they're a teacher because the statute says including but not limited to. And while they may be providing some level of instructional services, they may not be providing full instructional services through the course of their full duties or the course of the full day. I guess the other aspect too, on page, I'm sorry, line 5, and other similar positions. Again, and the same thing with including but not limited to. NHSBA is concerned that that is rather vague, and we may be opening the door to positions within a school that are not necessarily quote unquote teachers. And I believe there's some Supreme Court cases that tried from probably 40 years ago that tried to define what the teacher is within a school district for the purposes of the statute. And the New Hampshire Supreme Court generally opined that you have to be engaged in the delivery of an instruction. So for example, a teacher is a teacher. A superintendent, not necessarily a teacher, because while they're the head of the school, they're not in the classroom providing the direct instruction to the students. A school nurse is not necessarily a teacher per se. They're in the building and they're providing services to students, but not necessarily instructional services to students. So those are a few reasons why NHSBA opposes the bill. We think the current statute seems to work just fine for purposes of collective bargaining, for purposes of the non-renewal rights that are attached to the larger statute, RSA 189:14A. So, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Questions? I have a very simple question. Who should benefit from this?
Who would benefit from this? Well, I would say including but not limited to other similar professional positions. So, for example, there's no licensure at the Department of Education for a speech pathologist. They get their licensure from some other governing board, is my understanding. They may be have non-renewal rights per the collective bargaining agreement, and they're members of the collective bargaining agreement, so they get the health insurance on the steps and the tracks for whatever their education is based, and that impacts their pay and so on. They don't necessarily have non-renewal rights per current statute. The collective bargaining agreement can extend those non-renewal rights, your tenure rights essentially. After 5 years, you're no longer probationary, so on and so forth. So those positions can be included within a collective bargaining agreement without having to amend the statute. Speech pathologists, some districts may have occupational therapists, behavioral specialists, the non-classroom individuals who are providing a level of service to students.
Any other thoughts, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I don't see anybody else who likes to speak to this thing, but do we have anybody sitting here? Sir?
Good morning, and thank you. My name is Steve Chamberlain. I'm the Assistant Superintendent SAU 39. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. So this is my 37th year in public education. I was a math teacher, a department head, an assistant principal, superintendent, assistant superintendent, and interim superintendent. I was a teacher in Hollis Brookline when Sauhegan was founded, and Sauhegan was founded in 1992 and instilled a couple of positions, two positions that still exist, a dean of faculty and a dean of students. I ended up being an assistant principal, and as 3 years ago, I moved to Sauhegan as an assistant superintendent and got firsthand to see the job description, the roles, responsibilities, and credential related to the dean of faculty and the dean of students, and we felt them very similar, if not identical, to the work that I did as an assistant principal. And when the question came up about the continuing contract status for a dean versus an assistant principal in other schools within the district, it was unclear. By the statute, some people in our SAU felt that they already had the same protections of continuing contract, even though the statute didn't call out the dean role. Other districts in New Hampshire, other schools in New Hampshire have continued and added these type of roles. I think Alvirne High School, Salem High School, Pembroke Academy, I believe, also have positions of like responsibilities, like experience, and like credential under the auspices of dean. In HR or those personnel opportunities, clarity is kindness, clarity is care. And in meeting with the representation of the Amherst region, it was just if we could get some clarity about the role of a dean versus an assistant principal in the same SAU, that would be helpful. and I am humbled and privileged to see the number of people who have dedicated their lives to public education, and especially those who have assumed the mantle of leadership in this time, and to see in the same SAU, 100 yards apart, one administrator with the exact same roles and responsibility as another, one afforded the protections clearly articulated for the continuing contract, and one ambiguous at best, if not lacking. I'm troubled. They both are incredibly dedicated and incredibly committed, and I just believe clarity and consistency and kindness on that realm would be beneficial to all. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Questions from the members? What is the clarity?
So in the statute, it says assistant principal. It does not say dean of students. It does not say dean of faculty. I'm not sure, as an advising administrator, whether or not a administrator in Sauhegan under the auspices of dean of students would have the continuing contract rights of an assistant principal, because the assistant principal is actually called out in the statute.
And who? My background is not as an educator, so I don't understand why you, for example, how you said there were two places very close together.
Yes.
And yet they have different descriptions of what their duties are.
Same duties, different title.
Different title, okay. So who writes those titles? Who makes those decisions? The legislature or the?
Oh, that's a great question. No, the founding documents of Sauhegan High School establish the positions of Dean of Students and Dean of Faculty. Amherst Middle School has assistant principals. So those are titles that were established by the Sauhegan Cooperative School Board, I think at one point, versus the Amherst School Board. They are actually different school boards. But in the community where I live, which is Bow, one school board, one school has a title of dean and one school doesn't. So I think the titles are actually determined by the governing body. But I think some schools, and I think what happened at Sauhegan, when I was an assistant principal, I did both faculty leadership and student management. And I think they just carved those out for a little bit more economy of scale, so they increased the resources. But I believe the board approves job description and titles.
So do you support this bill?
I do.
Okay, for what reason?
To provide clarity to the people who are credentialed like a principal, performing an assistant principal, performing the duties as an assistant principal, to have the same rights as the statute as an assistant principal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else. Anybody else wants to have some last minute words on this, 528? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on Senate Bill 528. And that concludes the hearing on the Senate education. I'd like to go into executive session. I'll second. So move. So we are now in executive session. I guess.
Can I make a motion?
What?
Can I make a motion? So I move out of pass on Senate Bill 528 relative to the trustees of the university system. I guess I'm going out of order, but.
Well, just tell me the number. Those are the ones that we talked about today?
Yes, Senator.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, did you, if you want to go back further, sorry. I'll withdraw my motion. Why don't you tell us how you want to proceed, and then I'll roll in.
Just take one at a time here. What number was that? 528.
Would be appropriate to take a 2-minute recess, so we can caucus for a minute. Would be appropriate to take a 2-minute recess, so we can caucus for a minute.
Sure.
So Madam Chair, I asked for a 2-minute recess so we could caucus.
2-minute recess.
Okay, the Senate Education Committee is back in session. We'll have for our executive session. And we are going to exec some of the bills. Any suggestions?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that on Senate Bill 377 ought to pass.
377?
Second.
Ought to pass on 377. With a second. Any discussion? That's the able. The first one this morning. I know. Yes, if you, they need to set up a new account because of money coming in for this new program, and they don't have a place to put the money, and that's what this is all about. So did I hear any discussion on 377, except ought to pass with a second? Okay. Okay, so ought to pass was how many are for ought to pass?
Aye.
There's 1, 2, 4, 5.
Move
Aye.
consent calendar.
Move to consent.
Second.
Second. All those in favor for consent?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0. Who wants to take it out?
I'll take it out.
Jan Joe will take it out.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Lang?
I move OTP on Senate Bill 379.
379.
Second.
That's the emergency action plans for sports-related injury. Do we have a motion and a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of 379 ought to pass?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 5-0. Do you
Move
want to put
consent.
that on consent?
Second.
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
It's 5-0. I'll take it out. Senator Prentice will take it out.
Madam Chair, I move for ought to pass on Senate Bill 442.
I'll second that.
442.
42.
Ought to pass in the second on Senate Bill 442. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, if I may, offer a
Yeah.
friendly amendment.
Right.
I'd ask that we amend under line 10B. It was clear through the testimony, there was a little confusion on whether it was on the initial denial of a school board or initial denial after the entire appeals process that are identified in 193.3 was exhausted. So what I'd offer at the end of line 11, where it says 193.3, and add to that, and exhaust all appeals granted in 193.3. So that means that they have to follow up the process and go to the state school board, and if they're denied all the way through that process, they'd be eligible.
Do we repeat the and exhaust all?
Yeah, after on line 11, right after it says 193.3, put a comma there and say, and exhaust all appeals granted in 193, RSA 193:3.
That will be a committee amendment. Any discussion, Senator Prentice?
Yes, so the only thing, my hesitation of moving on this today is that I did ask, I believe it was maybe Bear, Christina, and one other person to try to help me with information on manifest educational hardships. I think there was, you didn't, what's happened at the local level, you don't have, it's only what comes up to the state board. But is there any way we can just hold to get a handle on how big a problem this really is?
If I may.
That's what I'd like to do, is just ask for that. So good.
So there was information emailed to all of us on number of cases. that were done. There was, I believe it was 26 cases over the last 10 years.
Who's
that
the email
were-
from? Sorry,
I
Senator
don't
Lang.
recall. I
All
either
right.
saw it this morning or yesterday. I don't remember which.
Mm.
But it was emailed to us. Let me get to the
I'm
right-
sorry that I missed that. There's so
Um,
many emails.
And so, let me see if I can find it for you.
I can just look at it by manifest.
Yeah, I can't find it, but it was emailed us. They gave us a list of the last 10 years, about 25 cases, I think was the number,
Okay.
that had made its way to the state board. And the last year, the answer was 3 cases made it to the state board.
Any further discussion? Senator Prentice?
Thank you so much. And I mean, in general, I appreciate what Senator Lang, what you're trying to do is kind of like smooth the trend. What is it? It's like like a landing when you come out of a process where you haven't been successful. And I've been and continue to be sensitive to that not every student fits in one particular box and needs other help. It's my fundamental disagreement is how we pay for that. So I'm sorry that I missed that email. That's good data to have. So it says that it's really not that frequent. But I do, and I did bring this up during the hearing, feel like this is just, that this brings about more money into the Education Freedom Account program. So I appreciate what you're trying to do in creating this pathway, but I don't know if that I can't support putting any more money into the Education Freedom Account program at this time. And so thank you.
I would say I'm very concerned about the fiscal responsibility of this bill. When a student whose enrollment transfer request was denied, that, to me, I'm reading this, that their income eligibility for the EFA program is no longer required. So that 350% of the federal poverty guidelines is no longer required if their request was denied. So we are creating a massive loophole for the wealthy to take advantage of when, if I understand these EFA programs correctly, they were for low-income individuals who wanted to send their children to private schools. And this just opens a door so that a very well-off family can take advantage of taxpayer-funded program with no repercussions, no guardrails, no nothing. And I also have a question about the amendment that says, exhaust all appeals granted. Who is determining that we've exhausted all the appeals granted?
So one, the appeals are outlined in the RSA, and it talks about the fact that where it goes through in 193.3, it talks about what appeals process and what the process is for a manifest hardship, and if you're denied, where it goes and what happens to it. So that's already defined in law, what the appeals are under 193.3. And to your other point, actually, I'll just leave that alone. It's not gonna be an argument. We're gonna win in this discussion, so.
Wait a minute, we're not up. So, no, I can't. Sorry,
Okay.
I trust you.
Yeah.
The data you brought forward, it's just, when I miss an email, I'm sensitive to it, so I'm trying to find it. There was another time I was looking at it.
The people, where are we in the process? We have voted on the committee amendment?
On the amendment, right?
On the
discussion of
amendment,
We did to committee adopt the amendment.
We've got to now vote.
Okay.
Okay.
We have an ought to pass on 442 FN. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
And so that's up to pass, that's 3-2.
Move to adopt the committee amendment.
Second it.
So now we have the amendments of the bill.
Hold on one second, Chair. Madam Chair.
Hmm.
You good?
So then we go back to the amendment. So we have an amendment. Yes.
Grant Bossy, Deputy Chief of Staff. You don't vote on your ought to pass until you've considered all your amendments. So you kind of jumped ahead. What you need to do is reconsider that ought to pass so that it will now be open again to amendment. Consider the amendment, then vote ought to pass with amendment.
So ought to pass with a second.
Yeah, you voted on that before considering the amendment. If you would like to consider an amendment, you need to reconsider your ought to pass. Somebody will bring in an amendment, you'll vote on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move as
Start from scratch?
voting on the
Okay.
prevailing side, I move reconsideration of the auto pass vote.
Second.
All those in favor of reconsideration of ought to pass?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Madam Chair, now I offer the committee amendment as explained.
Second.
Any discussion on the committee amendment? We have a ought to pass on the committee amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
No.
No on the amendment? There's 3-2 on the amendment. Now we go back to the original bill.
The original bill as
The
amended
original
now.
bill with
With
the
amendments.
amendments. Yes. And
So I'll make that motion.
ought to pass?
Ought to pass.
Second.
Second. And you know, okay. So the original bill with the amendment is ought to pass 3-2. Who wants to take it out?
I'll take it out, Madam Chair.
Lang will take it out. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I move ITL on Senate Bill 444.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion of ITL and a second on Senate Bill 444. And any discussion? Senator Prentice.
Senator Ward, so once again, and I'm pretty sure I don't have an email on this because we just talked about it, but I would like even just a week to explore whether I want to take this and move this over, basically amend it and put it into 91A.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure process-wise, and, forgive me, but it probably would end up at another committee at that point, and I can't introduce a new bill, so I could amend this and then have it redirected, if I'm correct, to a different
ask-
committee, and that's the only thing I would ask for that consideration from my fellow committee members, as I would give you. If you can't do it, then you can't do it, but, okay. So,
Madam Chair, that was my concern, is I think it was almost universally agreed it was a 91A issue, not a school board, a state board issue. And if we pass this, it doesn't have an opportunity to go to a second committee because it wasn't designated as a second committee bill, has no FN, doesn't go anywhere else. And so, and it would be in the wrong policy committee passing a 91A agreement. So I think unfortunately, it's either you go have a chat with Senator Gray and find a bill to amend over in his committee, which is I think where it would end up landing. It's where 91A bills tend to go to pass or die. But I don't think we should pass a 91A language without it going to a policy committee of appropriate.
well, thank you, Senator Lang. I'm not so much asking you to pass the 91A language, is if you could just give me a window before we ITL this to find a landing pad for this. Okay, I mean, I heard the testimony today. I understand the concerns, and maybe it is a broader discussion. There is something that I heard today that was of interest to me, that once an agenda, a member of the board gets the agenda and the materials, I believe that is a point in time which it becomes public. But when you look at 91A, it's just about posting the agenda, but not the materials. And so does that need to be clarified? So I would just if you so choose to ITL, I'm not going to support it only because I would like the window to go do this. But I guess I could go do it anyway. So maybe I just talked myself out of it. All right.
Judy said, what is it you want? You talk yourself
I'd
out
just
of it?
like a week
Okay,
till the next time we meet to talk to Senator Gray and see if taking this, I'd also, if taking this, if he would, if I could find a place to amend this language onto another bill.
yeah, I can see that.
Out of deference to my client, I'll withdraw my ITL motion.
And I'll decline my second.
And I appreciate that, and I will act on this promptly and be back to you next week, and I appreciate that. And again, I know I don't have an email on it. Okay,
You
good,
said
thank you.
Senator Gray, you want to discuss it with him?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to Senator Gray.
On 444?
444, Election Law Municipal Affairs.
Oh,
I'm
I
hearing
see.
from Senator
Okay.
Lang that,
Okay.
where he's the chair of the committee, that is where 91A bills land.
Okay.
So, and in the larger context, I'll be clear, there may be some unintended consequences. Maybe it's a greater move and it just clarifies what we hear as practice, but maybe not. So that's all I'm asking. And other than that, I would stand back. Okay?
So we hold off 1 week.
Please and thank you.
What do we have next? 528?
I'll second.
Trustees need versus. Discussion on that?
Madam Chair, I just have one thing I'd like to add to that bill. If you read that chapter of law under Roman numeral 7, it adds one alumni for Granite State College, and we've learned that they don't exist any longer. So I'd ask that we, as a committee amendment, just strike section 7, which removes the alumni person from the that Board of Trustees.
Is it on the bill here or does?
It's not. It's in the law. I pulled up the law to read what it says. And one of the members of the Board of Trustees is identified as an alumni of Granite State College, yet through testimony of everybody, we heard Granite State College has been absorbed into UNH and it doesn't exist anymore. So while we have the chapter of law open, let's clean it up and get rid of that provision as well.
Okay. The committee amendment.
So the amendment is just to repeal section 7 would be which strikes the alumni member from Granite State College.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. here.
187A.
528. We have what to pass?
So we not to pass motion, and I have an amendment to also add as a committee amendment, striking section 7.
Are we doing it in the right order?
So now we vote on the committee amendment, whether it's accepted.
Do you have the number of that, to repeal the what you want to?
The RSA, yeah.
27?
187.
187.
It's in the same exact chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. Roman numeral 7.
So all those in favor of striking the reference to Granite State College? Aye.
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 So that's 5-0. Okay, now let's go back to the original. Here we have ought to pass. Now we have ought to pass with the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's 5-0. You want to put that on consent?
Move consent.
Second.
Okay, who wants to take it out? Prentice? Okay, that takes care of 5-8.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we ITL 520, SP 529.
Second.
Any discussion on 529? Has to do with the definition of teacher.
Madam Chair, I would just say, we just heard the bill. I think there was, I think we should hold on to the bill just maybe for one more week, let the prime sponsor review what happened in committee. She had to run out, so I'm sure she didn't even hear what actually happened. And maybe she has an idea of how to amend the bill to make it a little bit more palatable for everyone to make sense. I would just say that, for as a favor to her.
Madam Chair, if I may. So again, I'm inclined to, it's not very often I find myself on the same side as Mr. Barrett over there recently. And so the School Board Association was pretty clear that this has some pretty large unintended consequences that I don't think are going to be fixed easily. And in further testimony, we heard that this is really a school board matter. They could easily fix this problem by renaming titles, right? They've created titles with no consequence to what it means in law. And then go back in the case we heard about the assistant principal who's title dean of students or something, but the reality is it's assistant principal's position. But they created a new title that has no definition in law whatsoever, and that was done locally. So again, I think this is a local issue that can be dealt locally. I don't think we need to take up state time and create new definitions.
But, Mr. Christie, is this something that could be dealt with by the School Board Association?
I didn't hear your question.
Is this naming or having the same kind of a naming for the same position, is this something that could be taken up by the School Board Association?
We could certainly advise our members that when this bill has come forward and there may be some confusion locally as to who is subject to this statute and who is not subject to this statute, we'd work with private counsel, private attorneys that work with school boards in these sorts of hearings, and maybe make a recommendation that they review sort of their job descriptions and their job titles, and perhaps to avoid any confusion that may be occurring locally, rename those titles consistent with what's in the statute and Department of Education rules relative to certification.
Okay. Is that agreeable? Thank you very much. So we have ITL on 529. And
Aye.
we have a second.
Very moved that I second it.
Any further discussion on 529? Yeah. All those in favor of ITL on 529?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Move consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
0. Who wants to take it out?
I'll take it out.
Jandro will take it out. You all set now? Anything else? Pardon?
There's nothing else.
Okay, then we should be all set.
So I'll make a motion that we come out of executive session.
Second.
All those in favor of exiting executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're done.
Good job.
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair.
much.
Good job.
Out early too. Wow.
Compared to last week.
Yeah.
right?
Okay, now which ones did we vote on today? I have to.